Hello everyone, this is Master Viktor Neustroev, and today we start our next workshop, which this time is devoted to creation of complications in the position. Okay, so before we start, let me see if you have any questions, if you want to share anything with me. We are going to start the main part in just a few minutes. Okay, it seems that everything is working and people are still joining. Perfect. So for today, I prepared 4 games, and I think that this topic is actually very important because how to play for win if the position is too dry? Only by creating complications, and this is what I do myself in many chess games. If I play for win, I want to do. If I play for a win, I definitely want to complicate. Because how else? So my opponent should make a mistake, and how can he make a mistake if the position is too simple? Did I play against any GM or against famous players? Well, the famous GM, the most famous GM I played, I think it was Mitchell Krasinkov from Poland. We drew. I was playing with black pieces and we drew in 2019. His rating at that moment was 2630 or 20. I don't remember. Here in Argentina, I drew with another grandmaster, GM Diego Flores. I lost the game to GM Perez Sponsor here recently. In 2019, I defeated a GM from Colombia, but we played in Greece. His rating was just 25 and 1 or 25 and 3, I don't remember. Okay. Okay, so actually, yeah, I play against GMs. Oh, I actually defeated the GM, but he was like 23 something. I defeated him with white pieces, and you can find this game if you are a student of my course on Chessable. But which one course? Train Your Tactical Vision, I think. Okay, fine. So let's start. So as for my games, you can find my games against GMs. Most of them can be found on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Tricks of Chess. From time to time, I also show them in our lessons, at our group sessions, especially. Okay, fine. So first of all, why do we need to complicate the position? Because we want to achieve a result. We want to win. Of course, you understand that you take some risk and you can lose the game. Or make your position more vulnerable. Maybe not lose the game, but make your position worse, which then requires you to defend the position. But if your opponent gets confused, then you get a chance to play for a win. So we actually complicate the position because we want to confuse our opponent, because we want him to solve problems during the game which he is not ready to solve. For example, if he plays a composition, let's create an attack on the king, and this is how he, instead of just playing positionally, would have to calculate variations and would have to find how exactly to defend the king. We can do so, we can complicate the position in case if we, for example, make material imbalances in the position. Like, for example, exchanging rook for, well, maybe exchanging 2 minor pieces for rook and pawn, or rook and 2 pawns. we may change the character of the game. For example, by sacrificing a pawn, we may have some initiative and change the character from a positional game um, to a tactical one where calculation is required. So in order to make the position more complex, what do we need to do? We need to either change the pawn structure, maybe sacrifice something, a piece or a pawn, or we may advance our pawns. So yes, sometimes when we are worse, there will be such examples today. When we are worse and we want to play for a win, it does make sense to complicate the position. But what you should understand that you also take extra risk. If you are much worse, then instead I would, well, actually it doesn't matter. In all cases, you can still try to play to complicate the position to get practical chances to win the game. Okay, fine. So this is our first example. The position is approximately equal, and black provokes a mass exchange here with d5. Maybe not the best way to play if black wants to play for a win. So c takes d5. Well, something like this, then and then that doesn't work well. Here, what do you think we can do? Knight e8, or we have a better move? So if you're worse, then resign. No. If your position is worse, try to do your best. Try to improve your pieces coordination and neutralize drawbacks in your position. But if you think that the game is already lost and you don't have any single chance to draw the game, then yes, resign. But if the position is just worse, keep playing it. You don't have to resign. Okay, fine. So here, for example, in case of this move, when the pawn attacks your knight, you can just push d4, and after they take, you don't take one of these pieces, but instead you can just take on f6 with the bishop, and you keep this fork. So knight goes to a4, you take there, they double your pawns, but because the queens are likely to be exchanged, this is not such a big issue. And this is where black may play for a win. So what white did? Yes, that's right. So for example, when you play the hedgehog with black pieces, d5 is one of the common plans, which allows you to transpose to from a cramped position to an open position. So the pawn on a7 is not hanging. There is a queen guarding it in case of a trade. So c takes d5, e takes d5, and then he took. B takes there, e takes d5. So the most logical reaction here can be knight d5, after which, let me show you, knight d5, knight takes d5, c takes d5, rook c8, rook c8, bishop d4, and most likely it is a draw. There is isolated pawn, but at the same time, this pawn is a passed pawn. Black doesn't have any other critical nuances, I mean critical drawbacks in their position. There is also a possibility to trade, and then the game most likely ends in a draw anyway. So that's why instead bishop a3 first, to complicate the position a little. So, well, white doesn't make a mistake. So if white moves there, then after c takes d5, there is an attack, and there is also a threat of doing this move. Not a tragedy still, so this move becomes possible, but then maybe rook e1 and some complications on the e file. However, rook c2 was played. If, let's say, they first included this, they would lose material, because now it's a discovered attack and the rook is hanging on c1 too. So rook c2, knight d5, knight d5, c takes d5, rook exchanged, and black didn't achieve much. So it's basically the same position, but with the bishop already on a3, which is a kind of well, it's advantages, but not seriously. So the game continues with queen d3, queen e7. Why this move is played? On the one hand, it's a pressure on e3. On the other hand, the idea is to play this move, bishop c5, to trade, to deliver a check, then to try to invade into the enemy territory. Maybe d4 should be supported, because after there is a check on c5, the king has to go to h1, and maybe there can be some problems with the back rank. So queen e7. Well, if only white played bishop d4, his position would be completely fine. But he plays rook d1. What do you think we should do in this position? Well, it seems like a draw. It seems like a draw. We can play rook d8 and save the pawn on d5 for sure. We don't even need to protect it because right now it's not hanging. The bishop is vulnerable. So, but if we want to play for win, how can we complicate the position here? Okay, so what we have? d4 is the move. d4, rook d8. Bishop c5 also. Well, bishop c5 is interesting, but then they can just play bishop d4, and we didn't actually achieve anything. So take, rook there, on queen d5, there is a back rank weakness. So no, this is where black has to fight for a draw. Bishop c5 is not a move, but d4 is definitely a candidate move, because after d4, queen takes d4 is already a blunder because of this move. And actually bishop d4 is a blunder too, because after rook d8 they cannot avoid material losses. So you see? Okay, so exchanging rooks maybe. Okay, there was some point where you could take the bishop with the check, but black doesn't get enough. Rook d4. Well, in this position, rook d4 is a threat. So what they have to do is to move the king, for example. Now queen d6 works. That's right. Now queen d6 is a really good move. Bishop c5 now means that they can simply unpin with bishop takes c5. So, actually, rook d3. So if they take there, they lose a rook. So that's why rook takes d3. And what about this position? There is a mating threat on d8. But it seems to be not a big issue, right? Bishop a7. Okay, maybe black is a little better here. So yeah, actually bishop c5 is a nice move because black is still a little better in this position. Rook takes d3, queen f6, or queen c7. What is better? On queen c7, the bishop is not vulnerable. It definitely can be a fortress. So I don't know how exactly to play. Maybe just b4. Bishop takes a7, you think? Yeah, bishop a7 makes... No, why not? King a2. Yeah. So queen c1, queen c2, but rook d2, and then the checks are over after that. So that's why not? Because now you have to cover there. C with this, well, with this move, because if you do it with queen c8 move, it's possible to. No. There is still a move. This move. Well, it doesn't mean that you win the bishop. The bishop retreats, and then with two pawns on the flank, I think white is playing for a win. But if queen f6, it might work. Because if they now play this, there is a nice queen a6 move. King a2 is a must. Then let's play f5 or h5. What is better? And now they save the bishop, but they lose this pawn, and black has better chances. No, but here black is not losing. So here, after the bishop moves, it's queen a2. Black, it's approximately equal, but I would say slightly better for black. Queen f6 and then queen a1. So queen f6. And then queen a1. So bishop a7. This queen a1, king a2. And then you still have to defend it. Maybe there is a perpetual check. Like rook d3, queen a2, for example. Bishop, the queen cannot go to e3 because queen a6 is a check. Well, okay, fine. So queen f6 also is a good move. But what I wanted to show you was queen d6 move. It's definitely better. Queen goes to c2 and then bishop c5. This is how you win exchange. Because if not, then you still play bishop c5. How they can stop it? Okay, fine. So that's why white realized it and he played bishop f2 just. Bishop f2, bishop c5, supporting it. Well, the position is still equal because there is a blockade on d3 and black cannot do much with such a blockade. Rook d8, supporting d4. King goes to f1. And bishop b6, just as a prophylaxis. a4, h6, also prophylaxis. Rook comes to c4. I don't think they threaten to take, but black decides to play this move first. So now, for example, such a move like bishop takes d4 again fails because of queen d6. That's why white continue their activity on that side, so their task is to create a passed pawn. a6 was played to stop b5 maybe, or to at least get prepared for this move to hide the bishop on a7. Rook c1, bishop a7 anyway, b5 was played, there was a trade, and now what do we have? How to play for a win in such a simple position. White has a pass pawn on b5, however, it is blocked because of the control over the b6 square. But even if we don't control the b6, we can successfully control the b8. We have a pass pawn there, but they also block it. So both players got stuck. So queen e5, let's say king g1. Then what? The b pawn is protected. So there is only one option: to create an attack of the king or somehow distract the queen to be able to advance the d pawn faster. When bishop c5 right now is a blunder. So you want to focus on advancing this pawn. Okay. So queen a2. It's hard to suggest a move actually. Well, I don't know. Rook c2. Does it look good? Probably not, because there is a check, and then the king is a little more vulnerable. So maybe just rook b1 with the idea of b6. Then bishop b6 is a must, right? Maybe queen b3, because there is no d3. The bishop is vulnerable. So I don't know, something like that. But it seems that white can always defend. Okay, so John thinks that white should do this, and I don't think so. Let me show you what happened in the game, and then you'll see. So bishop b8. What move to play? h3 or g3? Looks like g3 is more solid because it restricts the bishop. If you play h3, maybe the bishop comes there, maybe there is this move. Or I think that it can be queen e5, queen h2, but again, queen h2 isn't dangerous. Even if queen h1 is played, it's just bishop g1. So bishop h2, king f2, and it's everything is defending there. Well, but yeah, but there is only a queen that can attack f3. Can you please stop drawing? Okay. The rook, yeah, but if two pieces are attacking you, you can sacrifice there. So you mean you're talking about g3, so king g2, and then attack on f3 somehow. Yeah, but it doesn't seem to be sufficient, because, well, okay, let's say you do these to attack. So, but they have the b pawn, they have rook c8 check, they have bishop d4, so you have to take care about d4 first. Well, but anyway, so let's say I just keep playing stupid moves, and here I just do that. So what you can do to progress? I just ignore rook c8, I ignore bishop d4, but okay, you set your rooks on your major pieces on the f file to attack f3, so I'm not going to push f4, but what then? The g pawn move. Well, if the g pawn moves, then yes, I have to play f4. But you see, you have urgent issues that are required to be solved right away, like the d4 pawn hanging, like the check here, the check that provokes the king to go to h7, after which there is a pin. Huh? Yeah. Oh, here it's black to move. It's black to move. Yes, so that's right. Black played rook f5. No, it's not right. So that's why I'm saying it's a wrong plan. So even if we... Yes. The point is that even if black can successfully come up with this plan, their attack on f3 is not sufficient. Aside from rook c8 and bishop d4, just this solid defense is enough to stop any activity. And now, to expose the king, these pawns are required. But if these pawns are required, instead you can do a better move. So anyway, h3 wasn't played, maybe because white didn't want to weaken dark squares and allow maybe this transfer or something like that, and he played g3. And instead of doing this, and that, you can start undermining this pawn. So h5. And after that, h4 becomes a threat. So they played king g1 and h4 was played. And now it's not such a simple position like it was before, because the g3 pawn is the object of the attack. White continued with rook d1, aiming to move the queen and threaten to take on d4 then. So h3, and suddenly white realized that there is a problem with the back rank. So king f7 to make sure that in case of a queen exchange and back rank weakness, they can escape. Bishop a7, so stop the b pawn, defend the d4 pawn. Rook c1 was played. What now? Well, this is actually the right moment to invade the enemy camp with queen a2. So this is what I, for example, would do. King g1, bishop b6, and if rook c6, then I can go there because then there is check on a1, which forces the queen to block, and after a trade of a queen, I can advance the pawn and try to promote it. So, well, still invasion of the queen on e2 is helpful, but in this position it was decisive. g6 was played instead. And, well, white should start calculating, which he wasn't ready to do. So, for example, rook c6, queen d5. Well, that was already enough, and well, here just rook a6 with b6 idea, for example. But he made a mistake. He played queen c4, offering a queen trade. And actually, if the queens are traded, it seems to be a draw. But if black wants to play for a win, with such a king on f1 being already a little compromised, we should keep the queens on the board. Yeah, of course, queen f5. What else? So here, well, they played queen c7, threatening to take on a7 and intending to play b6. So this is where white started playing the character of the position that he wasn't prepared. Instead of playing slowly, blocking and trying to promote, he had to calculate variations. In case of queen c7, he threatens the rook, the bishop, but f3 becomes vulnerable and maybe there is a checkmate. Okay, so what he could do is queen b3, protecting there. Then let's say d3. Bishop a7, queen takes f3, and this looks like a win, right? So the king cannot move. Bishop f2, queen h1, he goes there, and this is a nice checkmate. So if he did this move after d3, I'm sure he would lose the game. But queen c7, so attacking both. What do you think? How should we play? Should we still capture there? No. So may I know how old you are? 14 years old. Okay, so that's why it would be great if instead of bro you say coach or sir or anything else, okay? If, well, if we take the b5 pawn, then what? Why they cannot play king g1 just? Yeah, king g1, bishop b6 helps. That's right. So queen b7 doesn't seem like a big problem. Just, well, you cannot play d3, but maybe queen b2 works, because bringing the rook there to increase the pressure on the pin means weakening the back rank. Okay, let's go back. Yeah, queen b5 would be the best move. However, the game continued with rook f8, which is a good move too. So, for example, in case of queen e7, the position becomes losing because of what? Because of d3. Wait, but d3 allows him to bring his queen to his camp and defend weaknesses? So if you say queen f3, then the so if you say queen f3, they can capture on d4, and queen h1 doesn't win because because bishop g1, you play queen g2, king e1, and once you bring the rook to the attack, they can bring the bishop there. In which position? In which position? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was my suggestion, rook e8. And if king moves, it's checkmate there. But the problem is that there is this move. And if queen g1, then this. So according to what I see, it doesn't work super well. Maybe there is a perpetual check, but that's it. So queen f3 doesn't work. But if instead you play queen d3, well, does anybody see checkmate in this line? Where? No, you're talking about another line. So queen d3, yes, queen d3, this is right. Queen d3, king g1. Because if king goes to e1, there is checkmate. Now queen f3. This is a mating threat, so king f1 is the only move. And what do you think how to play then? Yeah, rook e8 or queen h1 works too. But queen h1 requires more analysis. So queen h1, because they can escape right away. If queen h1 they block, then you have queen g2, king f1, and then you can bring the rook. But bringing the rook right away is definitely better. Why not d3? That was the question. So d3 allows them to play queen e3 back. And now it's not checkmate. You said take what? No, okay, so queen d3 works. Queen d3, king g1, queen here threatening mate. They have to move the king again, and after rook e8, you are threatening with queen g2 and queen h1. So that's why checkmate is unavoidable. That's why white played queen f4, which of course made a lot of sense, but now queen b5 can be played immediately. That was the best move, actually. In the game, black for some reason decided to do an intermediate check, and then he took on b5. I don't know why, because if he took on b5, he would have extra tempo. Maybe he wanted white to play this move, which is a critical mistake. What do you think? How would you continue then? Queen b2. Oh, nice. So you take advantage of the pin. Yeah, but so they have to play rook d1, but there is checkmate on g2. So, oh, nice, nice. Okay, also queen e2 works. Queen e2 with the same idea, because retreating with the bishop to f2 doesn't work. You just take it with your queen. But queen b2 was nice geometry, actually. I like it too. Fine. This is what happened. But you see, this is already a winning position for black. It requires technique, but it's winning, and white achieved their goal. They complicated the position by playing bishop b8 and then h4, trying to attack this, and by playing h3, creating a weakness of the back rank. Because of that, they forced white to make a mistake. And this is how you can play in practical games. Now the rest is just simple. Now they promote their passed pawn because the white's task is to defend the position. So simply rook e8 with the idea of rook e1, and there is nothing that can stop it. Okay, fine. Yes? What? Alex, did you want to say anything? Queen? Queen f2, at which moment? Okay, fine. So, well, the most critical moment happened, let me show you where. Here, when bishop b8 was played. The idea was to provoke white to make a mistake. So when they did g3, which is not a mistake, but this is a hook that we can exploit by advancing our pawn to h5 and h4, and then weaken the pawn on g3 or advance the pawn further, creating problems with the back rank. Well, and h3 looks okay too, but doesn't look attractive for white because the black squares are weakened and they can... Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yes. Uh-huh. So what? So the for queen what? Queen e2? So let's do queen e2 like Michael suggested first. Okay, so do you think it's promising? What they can try? I'm wondering if this is a good idea. Well, okay, let's just not rush just queen here. So, and then d3 becomes a threat. I'm going to win this pawn. Or advance the d pawn further, because in my opinion, it should be blockaded. Maybe you can go back with the queen, but then it's h4. Now let's discuss queen e4 move, which probably works better. So queen b... These are my candidate moves. Queen b3, queen a2. Okay, let me try queen b3. What's your opinion regarding it? This pawn is hanging. Do you have to play this? No, but the pawn is hanging. Why nothing? Oh, I don't think it's sufficient actually. So if you take the d4 pawn, Yeah, let me see. So is this good enough or not? Rook c8, rook c8, right? Rook c8. Okay, so if it's rook c8, then it seems I have to take there. Yeah, maybe queen a4 is better. Well, instead of queen b3, what else I have? Just queen d7. Then you can play b6. Ah, but now I take and defend. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mark suggests queen h3 and h4 instead, but after h4 they can take with the queen if the queen goes to e4. Yeah, but I don't like queen h3 move because what then? It's not. Ah, you play h4, you attack. Okay, maybe, but well, queen d7 still offers chances to play for a win because of d7, because of this pawn being vulnerable. Ah. No, I don't think so. No, now I gonna play queen h3 and then h4. And then d3 is a threat. Yes, but g3 is hanging, so you have to survive with this move probably. And then d3 then. f4 to defend the pawn. Hmm? Sorry, I don't understand. What was the opening? I think it was Sicilian. I don't know which line, but it was Sicilian. Okay, fine. So let's finish the analysis of this game. No, that's not. So only f4 is possible, but then d3, and then you have to defend your position. So at some point there can be even a bishop move. Pawn takes and queen g4, attacking the rook on d1 if you decide to blockade with your rook. So let's continue. Let's continue with the next game. I don't want to waste time here. So bishop b8 and this h4 idea was a provocation. So the game between Tukmakov and Kasparov. So here black, black played this opening like King's Indian, or we can say it's Benoni. But black is a little worse. This is the theoretical position, and e6 move is well known here. It's Benoni, yeah. So e6 move is well known. Well, it can be from King's Indian in case if c5 is played then. But it was from Benoni, you're right. So e6, knight f3, it takes d5, it takes d5, h6, this rook e8, and then they try to bring the knight to e5. This is the plan for black. But that was known as a slightly better position for white. And you have to know the tournament situation. To win the tournament, black needed a victory. And it's difficult to play for a win in a slightly worse position, especially against white. Vladimir Tukmakov, who was already ready to draw the game because he didn't need a win, he needed a draw with white pieces. That's why he chose a solid opening, and the Kasparov's task here was to complicate somehow. So what would you suggest for black to complicate? So knight e4 is very optimistic. So knight takes e4, knight takes e4, then what? Queen a5 check. Well, I don't know. I like bishop d2. I like king f1. It doesn't cost a piece. Okay, so Manish, yes, let's not interrupt. Brian, please continue. Ah, knight f4, queen a5, queen a2. Mm-hmm. Well, but in my opinion, it's too much. So it's piece for two. Well, even if it's three pawns, you have a very high risk to lose the game. Later, you're gonna see a similar situation. How Mikhail Tal did approximately what you said, but that was Tal, not Kasparov. And Tal was a world champion, but only once, while Kasparov was dominating during many years. So, right, okay. So, Manish, your turn. What did you suggest? Yeah, so somehow play b5. So, for example, John I think suggested a6, like this gambit, right? Yes, a6 and b5 idea. Well, Kasparov decided that he can start sacrificing the pawn right away, so there is no need of his a6 and then b5. He can sacrifice already with b5, and the knight cannot take because of this move, right? So he took, well, so queen a5 fails because of bishop d2, and now, well, there is no discovered attack. The knight doesn't have a good square, but the key point is that he doesn't need to. Now, for example, the knight takes on b5, and that looks fine. That's why queen a5 was too early and a6 was played. So not a6, b5, but b5 and a6. Wait, queen a5, then bishop d2 right away. So there is no knight e4. And if you play knight e4 first, knight takes e4, and then I don't see the point of queen a5. Yeah, they combined Benoni variation with Benka gambit. That's right. So a6, a4 was played. Kasparov plays h6, chasing the bishop back, so the bishop goes to a natural position. And what do you think? How to continue? Should a takes b5 be played? Well, in such a case, I think that Tukmakov would prefer bishop b5 with the idea to bring the knight to e2 to make his position more solid. This is how he has less risk to lose. If only we get the knight to d4, it's definitely good. But how? From which position? e5 is a good position for the knight, but it takes time, so you need to start immediate actions. What do you think is, well, what is the main idea of the black's position? What's the main advantage for black here? Uh-huh. So how do you understand that a6 is a good move? You can do it if you realize that, yes, e6, e6, yes. Uh, yeah, this is exactly what I'm saying. E6 is a good move. How to realize that e6 is a good move? They are not castled yet, so they have problems with development. These pieces are not developed neither, but well, we can develop them rapidly. So, for example, if they take, we take with a bishop, or we take with a knight. Actually, with a knight, it seems to be better. So that's why e6 was played. And to not open the position more, white decided to take, because in case if they just play knight f3, they open the e file. It was still fine, but he decided to keep it more closed and castle first, and only then continue opening it. So a takes b5 was played, bishop b5 was played, knight a6. Castle, and what do you think? Well, black's position is worse, for sure. Like it's +1 or something. There is no compensation for the pawn, even no partial compensation for the pawn, but the position is already very complicated, and just one inaccuracy may change the character of the game and provoke or force white to defend the position instead. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I actually thought that knight b4 can be played, but then I realized what then? We don't have the control over these squares. So that's why what does the knight help? With knight c7, well, with knight b4 too, we prepare a d5. But with knight c7, we also attack on b5. And maybe a bishop pair may help us to create more imbalance of the position. So good question from Brian. Why can't the complications be considered as a compensation? Well, okay. No, I don't think so. Anyway, they should retreat with their light squared bishop here because the line you suggest, just d5 can be played. Wait. No, maybe knight h5 first and then d5. Okay, so no, let me answer the question. I think it's more interesting. So why complicating the position is not considered as a compensation? Well, probably because we assume that both players, we don't know who is playing, but we assume that both players have equal skills playing simple and playing complicated positions. That's why they both are in equal situation. So, well, but if we know that Kasparov is better combinator, better tactical player, then yes, it can be considered as a compensation. However, when we analyze the games and when we play the game ourselves, we don't really know much about our opponent, and that's why we should expect him to have similar skills, and that's why our task is to objectively outplay him. That's why, well, we should say that, yes, the position is complicated, but white is still better. And, well, complicating the position doesn't make us a better player. It just increases a chance for our opponent to make a mistake, either for our opponent or for us, but, well, in both cases, the evaluation of the position doesn't change. It's already +1. Yes, he should retreat with the bishop to keep a bishop pair, and then in case of d5, which Kasparov already planned, queen c1, and the position looks solid. So now black has to play for a draw in such a case. But Tukmakov made a mistake. He played rook e1. Not a serious mistake. It's a logical move. He develops his piece. But knight b5. So knight takes b5. Taking with the pawn was okay too, but he took with a knight. And d5. And with d5, black managed to activate his pieces. So e takes, knight takes, and the b2 becomes vulnerable. And he plays knight e5 to close it. So this is where a tactical battle begins, because more pieces are under attack, and black has a bishop pair. So rook e8, rook c1. c1 is a weakness. a4 is protected. Bishop f5. e5 is hanging. This is where, if white wanted to hold the center, they should take a little more extra risk and play f4. But probably they decided to not do this because they were ready to play queen rook c5, and then they wanted to prevent this pin. So now the pawn is poisoned. Okay. Knight on b5, what? Okay, so, well, white continued with knight c6. Threatening the queen moves, and then, well, another risky move, rook c5. So this is where, well, a tactical player is likely to have more advantage, and definitely Kasparov calculation skills were better. What for? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm just checking your comments on both platforms. So Arjun, this is our viewer on YouTube. So today we are working on how to complicate the position, how in a approximately equal position to obtain winning chances. So complicate to confuse your opponent, to provoke him to make a mistake and play for a win. No, rook e1 is fine. Okay. Manish, can you lower your microphone a little? I don't know. Uh-huh. Okay. Alex says, how can a player deliberately transform such an equal position into a complicated one where where calculation becomes a decisive factor? Now it's better. Yes. Yes, it's fine. Rook e1, queen e1. And then rook a4, yes, then b4. No, I'm suggesting b4 for white. Well, you wanted to say anything better for white? Rook d5? So rook a1, queen a1, rook a4, rook d5, queen c6. No, then the rook is hanging. You can try rook d8, but king h7 is okay. King h7. Okay, so let's make this moves. Queen e1, then rook a4, which is fine. This actually what Kasparov would better play. Then queen c6. This is vulnerable. These two pieces are hanging. You can deliver a check, but what for? King on h7 is safer than the king on g8. Well, and you cannot play like queen e8. It's a blunder. So queen e8, for example, rook a1, bishop e1, trade, and then just break the connection between these two pieces, even with just this move. And in case of king f1, it's bishop c4. Yes, that's right. So that's why I don't like rook d5. I think that white should continue with b4 in this position. And rook a1 doesn't help. Fine. So, but Kasparov played rook e8. Why not? He doesn't want to trade pieces, and he doesn't care about the pawns. If he wins the pawn on a4, well, he's just one pawn down, but his task is to win. So not to liquidate the pawns on the queen side. If he liquidates it, the position again becomes even. But his task is to create complications on the king side. So queen c1, knight b6. This is hanging with a knight and then the b2. So b3 was played, but rook e2. And this already becomes the problem because the rook is on the second rank, so the bishop is hanging. They try to save it with a temper. And this is where I don't want you to rush and type the move that black played here. So black already created what he wanted. All white pieces are crowded on the queen side. They have two extra pawns there, and if they advance them, most likely they win. However, they don't have pieces defending the king. So what would you play here for black? Bishop b2, and then what? Let's say queen f1 is played. Where is a win? How does rook e6 wins the game? Rook e6, bishop b6, let's say. You threaten to win the queen. Uh-huh. So how they can stop it? Maybe they don't need to. So bishop b6 looks like not sufficient. Rook b2, rook b2. Yeah, well, makes a lot of sense, of course. Knight c3, yeah. Let's do knight c3 like you suggested. Yeah, I was calculating rook d5 move, but maybe knight c3 is just a simple solution. There is a bishop here. You cannot play rook d2. Okay, so knight rook b2, knight c3, bishop takes. Rook b1 is played. So rook b1, queen b1, bishop b1, rook d5. Your turn. Yeah, but I like knight c3 move. So, but well, yes, we should continue doing. Okay, so let me. Yeah, that's why. No, I'll show you. So knight c3, bishop c3, bishop c3, rook b1, queen b1, and rook d5. Rook d5, knight d5. What are we talking about? Yeah, because my idea was that once the queen moves, it's a checkmate there. Yeah, but I didn't. Well, and if this move, knight e7, but I forgot about this knight. Okay, no, this is already losing. So after that, maybe we can just display queen e1 or queen f1, queen e1. Now rook b1 means rook c1, so it's not such a big issue. You cannot take on c6, so let's say rook b1, rook c1, and if queen c6, it's just rook b1. Bishop b1, queen b1, and white is still 2 pawns up. So rook b2 doesn't seem like a very strong move. Bishop b2 is interesting, but again, what for? Just to drive the queen away? Yeah, okay, so there is also rook c2. Well, rook c2, I'm not sure about that because there is queen e1 after that. But yes, we already rejected knight c3 line, so let's instead after rook b2 play queen e1. So queen f1, queen e7 double attack. Then well, it's you cannot use e1. Oh, queen e7 is a blunder actually, but you don't you cannot play this move. So you can try bishop d3, but yeah, what is the goal? Where do you move this rook from e2? So for example, if I just I don't know, capture on b6. Well, why? Yeah, I think rook e6 should be played actually. Well, and okay, so I play this move, let's say. Ah, you can play this move, you mean? Okay, sorry to mute you, but there is a background noise. Okay, so bishop b5 is a nice move actually. Yeah, I didn't see it. Okay, so let's just play knight before then. Now the rook cannot move because of knight d3, and it seems that white defends the position. So Kasparov played a better move. A better move from a practical point of view too. Yes. So it's time to take advantage of the king's weakness. And you are trying to use the back rank only. So bishop f4. How does it work? So now, for example, if bishop b6, it's queen g4, and after queen f1, it's rook e1. This is winning. So f3, bishop takes f3, it's still fine. If in this position, instead of queen f1, they just play g3, it's queen f3 with checkmate on h1 at the very next move. So that's why immediate actions were required. And after bishop e4, it was played knight e5. It stops queen g4. And if, let's say, here, well, queen e7 was played. But if we take, they take, now queen g4 means rook e8. And after that, queen f1. And this time, because the bishop is still there, rook e1 is not playable. So he played queen e7, and the game continued with knight d4. In such a complex position, white plays a natural move, but this move becomes a significant mistake. Rook a2. It doesn't seem that black is winning here, but how to play? Both knights are hanging, so once the knight on e5 moves, the one on d4 is hanging too. If we open this diagonal, there is rook a1 winning the queen. So the game continued with bishop b6, bishop e5, and queen e3. But this is already a losing position because you can do what? Yeah, because you can play queen takes c5 and then take advantage of the back rank. So was there anything else that could work after rook a2? What do you think? Like maybe h3. Well, still the same story. Bishop b6 in this position. Just queen f6 maybe. And then rook a1. So rook c8, king h7. This is still hanging, and once the knight moves, it's rook a1. Okay, fine. So this is how the game ended. So Kasparov didn't want to win that pawn on a4. Instead, he wanted to like create more tension in the center and distract enemy pieces from the king side to attack on the king side successfully. Okay, so it seems that we don't have time for 4 games today. Let's do at least 3. So there is 1 game left then. And let me just remind you that our workshops are free. However, if you enjoy this content, I would appreciate if you could donate using either PayPal or Wise. So, for example, you can use this link to donate through PayPal. Huh? So, how does it work? You can click here, and new pop-up window appears. Then you enter the amount you want to donate, and then click this button which redirects you to your PayPal account, and then you can enter and send the amount to me. The other option is to use Wise. So just follow this link, enter with your account, and then you can send this amount to me. Fine. Any amount are welcome, so just anything. Let's continue. This time I would like to discuss the game between Lev Polugaevsky and Bent Larsen. So what do we have? It's already quite complex, but how to make it more complicated? For now, the position is very close to equality, but White wants to play for a win, and because of that, he wants to confuse his opponent. So it seems that some natural moves like Rook D1 can be played, right? So what else? Maybe the knight can move somewhere, not clear where. Maybe e5, knight e4 is the plan. Maybe it's time to play f4 to not allow your opponent to get the control over this square. However, at the very next move, they are going to castle. And maybe because they are not castled yet, we can somehow take advantage of that. Okay, so there is a suggestion of bishop h6, which makes a lot of sense. But then I wonder, what about bishop f8? Because if you take it, there is knight f4. And if you don't, then bishop g7 and he successfully castles. So bishop h6 doesn't work. This bishop does a very specific role. It defends f4. Rook g5 with the idea of rook h5. That would work in case if black castles kingside, then you have a deadly attack. But maybe in such a case they would prefer to castle to the other side. So what they can do? I was supports d5. Okay, I was thinking about c5 move. But okay, so let me play what? Queen f6. I want to play queen f6. Well, but even if you do a5, a6, and then castle to the queen side, well, just b6 and they keep the position closed. So here actually black can castle queen side because your pawns are not together, so they are not connected. For example, if they were, you would play this, you would play that, and most likely a pawn exchange and at least one open file was guaranteed. What for? No, I think you should do this and then just play rook g1 like you originally wanted, because castling there means bishop g5. But again, I'm not sure about bishop g5 because bishop g5, queen g6. So rook g3, let's say you defend the rook. then f6. This is protected. Yeah, a bit unclear. There is some imbalance and the position is complicated, but maybe we can do it without significant material losses. What else? So why didn't anybody suggest this move, d5? The king is in the center. Maybe it's a good opportunity for us to take advantage of that. Or maybe you don't want to expose your own king. Well, if so, then I understand it. What did happen in the game? They didn't take, actually. Doing queen f6 could make a lot of sense. Then take, and then knight f4 at some point. If e takes d5, e takes d5, so c takes d5, knight takes d5, this looks really fine because how to play. So this move, let's say there will be b7 hanging. So, well, which piece should we capture? Probably the bishop. And if they castle, at least we win a pawn and pass the game to a favorable endgame. We also have a bishop pair in this position. The position becomes open. So d5 is a really good move. Black reacted with bishop d6. That was a kind of a mistake. They'd better play queen f6 with knight f4 ideas. So bishop d6. D takes c6, b takes c6, and queen d4, taking advantage of the rook being unprotected there. So, well, e5 weakens this diagonal. That's why black played a logical move, castle queenside. Kingside, yes. So, how to continue? We do have advantage because of well, because our pieces are well placed. The queen is there. We have a better pawn structure, even regardless of double pawns on the f-file. But what we can do? Oh, let me see. Well, I don't think that it works right now because you're not threatening anything. If you take there, it's knight. Oh no, this time there is no fork. Okay, this is a big difference actually. No, let's say they just, I don't know, take on h2. Rook g5 right away. You threaten to take and no, your queen is hanging. So you have to trade queens, it seems. Yeah, you have to trade queens because otherwise you lose a rook. So maybe you can start with rook g5 first. And bishop h6 is not required even. How they can... they can continue with bishop f4 and still the queens are exchanged. So it doesn't work well. In the game, because white assumed that the game is going to pass to the end game, he played rook g to d1, not a to d1, because we don't really need the g file if there are no queens on the board. And also the rook on g1 is the object of the attack and bishop h2 is played. And actually, bishop h2 was played. With such a move, he confused his opponent because black thought that, oh, I am winning a pawn, so let's win a pawn, pass the game to the endgame, then I can escape to f4, for example, and it looks good. Well, not fully. Well, this is a threat. What can be done? So moving the bishop to f4 seems like a logical move, then trade, and then bishop a7 anyway. And after rook d2, so we don't win a pawn because they can take on b2. But it seems that we have a passed pawn, and because of this passed pawn, we are likely to play for a win. If they do what? Bishop e7? Well, then we can trade. Well, we can trade queens, but what else can we do? Can we just play this move? I don't think it's promising. I like queen d7 too. But, well, let's just trade. Trade, rook takes to not lose on a7. If we take for the second time, they take with the bishop, we can actually do it. Oh, yeah, and then we can invade the enemy camp. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, so how to prepare for the tournament? Well, it's not the object of it's not the subject of our workshop today, so that's why, well, a lot of things should be done for that. That's why it can be discussed at a private lesson. Bishop h2. So that logical move became a serious mistake. Queen takes d8, take, and finally bishop a7. Now there is no invasion, and there is a pass pawn on the a file, as well as it can be supported with the b pawn. Moreover, white wins because they have an outside pass pawn, which can be advanced quite quickly, and a bishop pair. And this bishop pair becomes an important factor. Later you see how. Bishop e5, so they centralize it. a5 is played, so knight f4. It seems that black developed some initiative, which is true, but white defended everything. Now there is no significant initiative, while this plan becomes unstoppable. For example, what do you think about such move like bishop b2? Doesn't it win the pawn? So this, and what would you suggest for white in this position? Bishop d4, what is the idea of bishop d4? Can they win a bishop? But they take on c4. So, okay. Bishop d4, rook b4, bishop f5, rook c4. So bishop b6 is good, but bishop d4 seems to be more straight. Because if rook b4, it's bishop e5, and we take that knight, that stops our pawn. So this knight is out of the place of action because we are about to advance quickly. Fine. So let's go back. That's why he didn't take. And what he did is just knight e8, which seems to be the best move to blockade the a pawn on e8. So moving the knight to the corner somehow became the best move in this position. Usually such moves are terrible. This rook goes there, and a6 to advance the pawn to a7. So king f8, knight c3, and step by step white improves the position of his pieces and advances the pawn to a7. So white is clearly winning here. Bishop d4 to trade bishops, but after rook d1 there is no trade. c5 is a blunder because of knight c5. That's why e5. But knight c5 anyway. Rook moves. However, there is a pin. There is a pin. The bishop on d4 is pinned, so you can just add pressure on this pin. And again, c5 is a blunder. The knight on e8 is not really doing much. So in order to unpin, they played this. Take, a7. And this position becomes technically losing. Okay, please tell me, how would you continue here? Knight takes. I think knight a5 is better. You create a threat at least. But if your task is to promote, cannot you just play bishop a6? Nobody suggested. Why? So bishop a6, then bishop b7, and then a8, and you win a piece. The only thing they can do is this. Bishop b7 and knight c7, but then you just take another pawn. That's definitely winning. So knight a5. To attack c6. Well, if they play this move, c5, to try to save it, it's still not sufficient. Well, there is knight b7 at the very least. What else there is? Still, no, this doesn't look so good. Yeah, I think this is the best move. And if knight e6, just take on e6 and take on c5. Should be sufficient. So king e7 was played, knight e6, king d6. The key idea was to bring the king closer, but this move. And now, for example, king c5 doesn't work well. What's your opinion regarding this move? It's a double attack. So based on the pass pawn on e7, what do you think you can do? Oh, really? No, it's winning for white. Okay, so Nike suggested and Zamfir suggested knight d5. That's right. So if they take there, you promote. If they take there with the king, then you take there and promote. And if this knight takes, then bishop takes, and still you can promote. Fine. So that's why knight e6, king c5 wasn't played, but knight d5 still training. They didn't want it. And knight f6. Now, if let's say king c7, you can just trade there, take on e6, and win the game. Or even if you just don't take on e6, g5 is sufficient. Then, well, let me show you. So this, they defend, and you play that move. They take on a7, you take on a5. This is definitely winning position. Knight h6 was played, but h6 means this. And after knight c7, what was the final move? Well, before is interesting, but knight e8 wins the game immediately. So knight e8, and then what? If knight takes there, it's bishop takes there. And now it's not possible to protect the a8 square. If the king moves, it's still the same story. Knight takes knight and then a8. And then you win a piece, and this is definitely winning. So knight e8, and after knight e8, they resign. What I want you to remember, so from today's workshop, is what are these ways to complicate the position. So you may change the structure, the pawn structure of the position. You may sacrifice a pawn to get some initiative. You can even sacrifice a piece for something, not just a piece for free, but a piece for a few pawns and attack, or some positional advantage, or your piece's activity, or you can advance pawns. There are a lot of ways to complicate the position. So the key idea is to change the character and force your opponent to solve problems that he didn't want to solve originally. Because if your opponent misunderstands what he should be doing, he is likely to make a mistake. Okay, so it depends on your strategy on the game. So, for example, if you're playing against a stronger player and if you want to win and you complicate, most likely you will be that person who will be confused and you are more likely to make a mistake and lose the game. This is true. So that's why when you play against a stronger player, you should utilize your strong sides. No, not obligatory defense. You should utilize your strong sides. So, for example, well, I'm good in calculation. I'm good in some opening knowledge. Well, if you are a positional player, then you should try the positions and you should like more think of how to maneuver with your pieces and avoid this direct confrontation. So against a player who is better in calculations, what you should do is just a character, change the character of the position to not to not a sharp one, for example, but to a calm one where calculation deep and accurate is not really required, where it comes more to understanding. So you can even change your opening repertoire. Yeah, these strong players can make mistakes too. So, for example, when I was playing the game against Grandmaster Mitchell Krasinkov, he was better prepared than me in the opening. Maybe he is better than me in other aspects too, but somehow he originally wanted to outplay me because of better understanding of the position. Because I spent like 40 minutes in the opening, he spent like 5 because he knew what he was doing. But then I made some like weird moves, maybe not the best moves, but provocative moves. And these provocative moves forced him to and think and to solve some problems. And during the game, he made one inaccuracy and allowed me to overtake initiative. And for example, in that game against a chess player who was stronger than me, his rating was 400 points higher than me. I even managed, because of this initiative, I managed to win a pawn. And when I took the second pawn, I saw that if he doesn't do an immediate perpetual check right away, then he most likely loses the game. So he also realized that, and he then delivered the perpetual check. We had queens and bishops on the board of opposite color. I mean, the bishops of the opposite color. So without 2 pawns, if not this perpetual check, he would lose. But I could also play for a win. For example, I could first defend my position against a perpetual check, but I decided to get at least a half of a point from this game. Yes. So this is actually what I tried to answer when I was listing by which ways you can complicate the position. So change the pawn structure, execute pawn sacrifices, even a piece sacrifice for an attack or for a few pawns and your piece's activity then, or advance your pawns to change the character of the position. That was the answer. Okay, great. So we are done for today. Let's finish. So what else you can do? Well, you can, if you want to support, you can also purchase my courses. If you are interested in individual classes, you can message me at tricks of chess, tricks of chess at gmail.com. So any questions are welcome. So see you next Sunday at the next workshop. Thank you for coming this time.